Welcome to the Fright Lab. I'm Lucas Yoakum. And with me tonight, as always, is Joe Wren. Joe is clearly pleased that I'm finally tackling this one.
I think we've made progress, Lucas. It's taken you this long. You, sir, have finally embraced the possibility that the mainstream films everybody wants to drink beer and talk about need to be addressed for their, shall we say, less than entertaining qualities, because this film is one of the films everybody mentions when you talk about the good, bad, or the 80s iconic. It's not really a scary movie. Tonight, we're not talking about Leprechaun. We're not talking about Evil Dead or the franchise. We already did that one once. We're talking about Killer Klowns.
I know you're saying,
from
Lucas,
outer space, sir.
I know you're saying, Lucas, you've finally done it. You finally embraced. No, I haven't. I haven't embraced anything. But it is the episode of the Fright Lab. And for those of you who have been playing the home game since, 2022, 2023, something like that, thank all of you. I really do owe it to all of you for sticking around for 50 episodes of this nonsense. And you know, when I was growing up, I was told that it was important to try new things. I was told that expanding your horizons, it was a mature thing to do, a 50 episode kind of thing, and it would only help to enrich my life somehow. And even now, I think it's helpful to revisit material you have, ambivalent feelings about, or maybe even as far as revisiting something you don't like. I mean, they say your taste buds change every 7 to 10 years. Maybe you like Brussels sprouts now. Maybe you can finally stomach cauliflower. You know how it is. And I've tried to do that with this podcast. And while I still don't like Incident in a Ghostland or Exorcist II, The Heretic, I can at least say that I have revisited the material I don't like and have reasons why I don't like them. The case of Exorcist II especially. Has that made me, a better person? Honestly, I don't know. But I can tell you one thing that has definitely not allowed me or helped me to become a better person. That, friends, fans, siblings, gruesome people, one and all, is rewatching Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Now, this isn't going to be an episode where I spend 45 minutes talking about how much I just don't like this movie. Oh, I don't like this movie. We've all heard it before. You've listened to this show for 50 episodes. Instead, I want to start off this episode simply and easily, as easy as possible. Why do people like this movie so much? But, obviously, that's not enough for an episode of the Fright Lab. In my experience, every good question leads to a handful of other good questions and more good answers, which in turn leads to more questions and more good answers. So, obviously, we have a lot to get into tonight. In large part, my need to interrogate the underlying phenomenon of this movie. In many ways, I want to revisit a question we asked while talking about the movie Beyond the Black Rainbow. Does a movie need to actually, quote unquote, be about something? Only in this case, I think the question has mutated some. And in a way, I am actually fairly intrigued by this question. More on that later. But let's start off the obvious. Joe, are you a fan of Killer Klowns from Outer Space?
I want to define the word fan.
Okay.
When you say, are you a fan of this film? I'm going to put the hard line on, do I watch this movie on my own if I am the only person in the room and I want to sit down and watch a film?
Sure.
And the answer to that question, sir, is a hard no. Never have I consciously sat down and said, you know what I want to do today? I want to watch Killer Klowns from Outer Space. I think this film has made its way onto the list I like to call Again. And that list exists when you get in a room with your friends, mostly the people you have spent the most time with in your entire life, whether you are 12, 20, 30, or 50. The people you have spent the most time in your life, when those people get together, there's a list of films that somebody wants to watch again. We mentioned Evil Dead 2 in previous episodes.
Exactly the episode I was thinking about, or exactly the movie I was thinking about.
We've talked about Big Trouble in Little China.
Of course.
We've talked about Legend.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah.
Killer Klowns from Outer Space is another one of those films. And in my opinion, this film is not well beloved because it's a good film or even because it's a cheesy, goofy, bad film that's so bad it's good. I actually don't think it's that bad. It suffers from some 1980s problems, but it's not a bad movie. I just think that this is one of the films that when DVDs started to become cheaper to produce, got released and promoted and people bought it because, look here, there's a movie called Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Let's watch that. That's weird and goofy and people will like it. It's The Room Before the Room in many ways.
Okay.
But I don't think it's that bad.
We're going to interrogate this more closely to the end of the episode because I've got a level with you. Friend, sibling, brother, buddy, we've known each other a long time. This is your fault. To your point, though, it is one of those movies, kind of like Evil Dead 2. Someone will always say, fuck it, put on Evil Dead 2 if you're in a room full of horror movie nerds like myself. I've even suggested that before, so, no judgment. But for some reason, and I don't really understand why, Killer Klowns is a deeply beloved movie amongst horror fans, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why. I mean, I get some of the reasons that people do enjoy this movie on like a purely technical level, like a filmmaker's level, right? I think this movie's actually pretty impressive. The costumes, the effects, the sets, they all look good. They are a little dated, but that's like not something you can avoid. Videodrome looks a little dated, even though I'm a big fan of the movie, as fans of the show will know. The movie Killer Klowns, it's genuinely gruesome. And that's to say they're well executed, right? Granted, I have opinions about a lot of the visuals, but haven't quite reached the space where I'm ready to start grousing about that, at least not yet. I genuinely think this movie is a success if you are looking at the movie only visually. The movie also came out in 1988. It feels to me, on some level, an almost quintessentially 1980s horror film. But I think there's some issue with that, if I'm honest. More on that later here again. So what is my deal here? Why am I about to spend probably 40-ish minutes of your time and my time and Joe's time that we absolutely could be doing something better with our lives, talking about a movie that I claim to not like, but will also praise for its better qualities? Think about my review of Mars Attacks several episodes ago. That, my dear audience, that's where we're headed. But before we do that, we do have to talk briefly about the plot of this movie, or at least what little plot exists. Not yet. I'm not going to start ranting yet. Let me try again. Furthermore, I want to approach this movie with a single question in mind. And that question: were the creators of Killer Klowns from Outer Space setting out to make a sincere horror movie? Or were they after something else? So, follow us into the cinematic big top, but skip the concession stand, at least for now.
It was a night like any other night. Then something happened.
You see that?
Something different.
It's no shooting star.
Why here? Why now? Why clowns? They've been knocking him dead all over the universe.
What are you gonna do? Knock my block off?
We can stop anytime.
Give it a minute.
Soon they'll be doing it at a theater near you.
Killer clowns from outer space.
After this episode, I will almost certainly need a psychiatrist.
I like to pretend that it was the dean from Animal House who got
Don't
fired.
associate this
and
film
had-
with a better movie. How fucking dare you? All right. Okay, so, that trailer says it all, right? Why clowns? I suspect we are going to get into this subject eventually, even if only tangentially. But like I said, we have to, tease out the details of this plot. Because honestly, this plot is paper thin. So here it goes. There's a small town in California, and there's a lot of horny teens looking for some action on a local's lover's lane kind of place. Or at least I think they're teens, seeing as all of the actors are played by like 25-year-olds behaving like children. Focus, Lucas. Anyway, our young protagonists see an unidentified flying object land nearby. Through a long list of wacky hijinks, they identify the object. It's a spacecraft, and it looks like a circus tent for some reason. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about that. Anyway, okay, the craft's inhabitants are an alien species of vicious conquerors armed to the teeth. And for some unexplained reason, they look and behave like clowns. The titular killer clowns, with double K's, killer clowns, are going to wreak havoc through the town. Why? Future Joe, spoiler alert, please.
The next section of the Fright Lab contains spoilers for the film Killer Klowns from Outer Space. If you're interested in how much Lucas loves this film, skip forward to 14 minutes and 19 seconds.
The clowns are using their human victims for sustenance. Using all sorts of silly clown-based techniques, they're extracting our precious vital fluids and using us as nutrition. So, the young citizens of the town have to band together to find a way to defeat the clowns, that's clowns with a K, before it's too late. Okay, ending the spoiler here. Well, that's really the whole plot. Killer Klowns from Outer Space is not a particularly complicated movie. It has a simple plot, but the costumes, the sets, and the special effects, I've got to say, they're good. It sticks to the premise and the aesthetic. In theory, you should love it or hate it. And a lot of horror, especially from the 1980s, I think tends to have that quality. Think about like Phantasm. You love it or you hate it. I'm a Phantasm guy myself, but when people tell me they don't like Phantasm, yeah, I get that. Now, siblings, you know as a fact, that I can't just leave this movie here. And some of you are also saying, come on, Lucas, leave it alone. You don't have to be such a stick in the mud about this one. Well, first off, yes, I do. I am always going to be a stick in the artistic mud. But more importantly, I think Killer Klowns fails to be what it is on two fronts. The first part is in the initial construction, and the second part is in what it has become in the years since its release. So, let's start with the initial construction, shall we? The film is directed by Stephen Chiodo. He wrote and produced the movie with his two brothers, Edward and Charles Chiodo. It's a family affair, which is fun, I suppose. It swings big with special effects, but the acting is... oof. It's struggling for the movie's entire runtime. Sure, you have the protagonist and his girlfriend. And there's a pair of brothers running around town in an ice cream truck too. And all of them are fighting the clowns. But what about the rest of the town, right? Like there's a whole ass town you've got to think about. Let's talk about them for a minute. Well, you've got the asshole town sheriff who seems hell-bent on tormenting the town's only two goth punks. And interestingly, they're the best spoken and most reasonably written characters in the movie. Whatever, I'm not going to get into that here. You also get a handful of kind of bad, weird stock characters. For instance, why is there an old-timey prospector, farmer, moonshiner guy living on the outskirts of town? Do the Terenzi brothers, that is to say the assholes in the ice cream truck, why are they trying to romance a pair of young women by making jokes about their weight and promising them ice cream in exchange for romantic favors? Listen, I don't expect the late 1980s to be like a bastion of sensitivity or even good sense or good taste for that matter, but the movie's simply a mess of bad stock characters and half-finished ideas. Now, I've heard this movie described in personal conversations with other horror fans as a parody of the monster movies of the 1950s and 1960s. But if that's the case, what is it we're parodying precisely? Is it parodying a specific movie? Or just a vibe, maybe? Well, neither work in that regard. A good satire, according to Poe's law, should be almost indistinguishable from the thing it is satirizing. The issue there is that the movie is actually indistinguishable from those 1950s B movies in terms of plot. Not almost indistinguishable, not kinda indistinguishable, but actually indistinguishable. It's very, very silly. Okay, fine, but that's not enough to sink a movie, right? So what about the creators, the Chiodo brothers? For the most part, their name is probably not the first thing you think of when you start talking about modern filmmaking, but they have a kind of interesting pedigree that, when you get down to it, kind of explains this whole thing, this whole movie. The Chiodo brothers were involved in Critters, which, for the record, actually a movie I really enjoy. But they went on to help Trey Parker and Matt Stone create Team America, World Police, which, in light of American politics, has aged like milk. Also, they were involved in a Parker and Stone TV series called That's My Bush. Joe, do you remember That's My Bush?
I have, I think, 4 episodes of that sitcom.
Okay.
Maybe 3, somewhere on a VHS tape, and I remember it being far more entertaining than it should have been.
Okay, so for the uninitiated, that was a 2001 sitcom. I guess sitcom. I don't know. I struggle to call it a sitcom. About the George W. Bush era White House, again, in 2001, mere months before the events of September 11th, 2001. It's kind of a hard watch now, is what I'm saying. Oh, and they were also involved in the movie Theodore Rex. Literally, Theodore Rex is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's not as bad as Shark Exorcist, but we're not talking about a big gradient there. It's real bad. Whatever happens to Whoopi Goldberg in her future, I hope she's ashamed of Theodore Rex. Follow me? Joe, have you ever seen Theodore Rex?
Of course, I've seen Theodore
Rex.
Rex.
Of course you fucking have. I don't know why I even asked you that question.
Any film that was a frequent play on HBO back in the day, you've seen it. You know you've seen it.
But
that doesn't mean you enjoyed it.
But rather like certain forms of nudity. Yeah, you've seen it, but should you have? Should you have seen it?
I blame the filmmaker and the production company that released the film.
Hate the cinematic sin and not the cinematic sinner. Back to Killer Klowns. The juvenile humor, the jarring atmospheres, and the feeling that they paid more attention to special effects than the rest of, the entire film. All of that is kind of explained by being a Chiodo Brothers movie. But, isn't that a matter of taste? Aren't I always saying that you should enjoy the things you enjoy and not worry about what others say? What do I have to tell you about your cinematic taste? You're correct if that's what you've been thinking. I have said that a lot. And if you love Killer Klowns, don't let me or anyone else dissuade you from loving it. But I want to make an argument that I know will seem, a little absurd, so just hear me out here. Joe, are you a fan of The Return of the Living Dead?
I don't know how you can be a fan of zombie anything without loving The Return of the Living Dead. That is to say, the sequels, I can take it or leave it, but Return of the Living Dead, it's on the list of essential viewing for me. It's one of those another flavors of a zombie movie that would lead to so much zombie lore later on. It's just part of the overall story. Return of the Living Dead is the reason zombies are known for brains.
You see that movie, Night of the Living Dead?
Sure.
They ship those bodies. Well, say hello.
The dead have risen from the grave.
Mister, there's 100 of those things out there.
How many did you say?
100?
And now the question is, how do we get them back into the ground?
Bert, Frank, we have a little problem.
4 left, 10 right.
It's all over everything! Stupid asshole! Watch your tongue, boy, if you like this job! Like this job!
Oh, the Tar Man.
Ah, the original vocals for the Tar Man. Because they changed it later on and made it deeper.
Yeah.
Science is moving.
It's a puzzle. Because technically, you're not alive.
Why do you eat people?
Not people. Brains.
How do you kill something that's already dead?
Well, how do I know, Fred? I don't know. Let me think.
It's not a bad question, Bert.
In that movie, they destroyed the brain to kill him. Is that what they did?
The brains, right!
Brains!
I love the Tar Man so much.
I hit the brain. Oh! Get it off! Get it off!
Man, what a great movie. Fans of this podcast will remember me gushing over this movie with a friend of the show, Dusty Gannon of Vision Video, back in episode 40. And Dusty, there's a good chance I know you're listening, brother. I can't wait to chat with you again. That was so much fun. Anyway, as far as the more, nihilistic strains of horror comedy are concerned, I think The Return of the Living Dead is basically pitch perfect. I won't spend too much time detailing this movie here since I want to give this movie a full episode of some variety at some point. I don't know how it's going to work, but I've got some ideas. Came out in 1985, but still, I don't know, it feels fresh and smart. Yeah, some of the effects are a little dated, and it definitely looks like it was filmed in the 80s. I'll grant that. But underneath the chaos and punk rock attitude of the movie, Return feels more fresh, more timeless. It lacks that sense of pastiche. And the comment it is making about government and leadership feels, well, it feels a little modern, doesn't it? It's definitely an 80s horror classic, but to me, it lacks that feeling of a quote-unquote 80s movie. Killer Klowns, on the other hand, absolutely feels like an 80s pastiche. But that doesn't make sense, right? It came out in the 1980s. How can it be a pastiche of the 80s if it came out in the 1980s? There are two factors at play here. First, we're going to have to revisit a concept that we've sort of touched on before, passingly, but we have touched on it. Kitsch. We've all heard of something described as kitschy. When you hear the word, you're probably thinking of something like paintings of dogs playing poker, or maybe like knick-knack kitchen goods. Essentially, kitsch is used to describe something made for a mass market that is, sort of banal or naive, maybe tacky or schmaltzy. It's also not necessarily like a bad thing. Historically, the word kitsch would have been used to describe art prints, or really anything meant to be aesthetically used, but created ultimately at an industrial scale. A copy of a photo printed a million times. Still good quality, but not an original, you know? Kitsch is also related to this idea of camp. And to draw the parallel you have heard me all use at least once before if you're long-term fans of the show. If you want to have bad taste, you first need to have very good taste. John Waters is something of the leading light when it comes to camp in cinema, and you could argue that movies like Serial Mom are more kitsch than camp. Violent, insane kitsch, but kitsch nonetheless. The second factor, and the one that I think is more insightful, is the idea of the lost future, or, in a word, hauntology. Joe, in the many years that we have known each other, have I ever gotten onto a kick of hauntology around you?
I think you've talked about the post-apocalyptic view of film and theater that happens at times, but I can't say I've sat through a symposium on hauntology led by the Lucas Yoakum of the Fright Lab, maybe from Blinders Off, but we're not going to go into that right now.
Another story altogether. You are thankfully one of the few people who have never endured my rantings about hauntology. There's probably a very good reason we've been friends as long as we have, and it's probably for this very good reason.
Why is everyone a cannibal in the future? Just asking.
That's another, you know what? We've got an episode. We'll get there. Right. So I am going to confess now that I am no expert on this subject. Like so many others, there's probably a supercut somewhere in the wings of things I'm not an expert about. We've got 50 episodes to review that subject. Nor am I entirely convinced that there are any living experts on this subject. But I will do my best to express this concept and how it relates to the movie at hand. The idea of hauntology first appears with the philosopher Jacques Derrida. Derrida is probably best known for his ideas around deconstruction, and hauntology sort of ties into that. The term draws from a play on the name Ontology. The University of Warwick describes ontology as, quote, concerns claims about the nature of being and existence. One of the longest-standing ontological questions in philosophy concerns the existence, or otherwise, of God, or at least some sense of a higher being. This has provided a springboard for philosophers to question, among other things, the purpose of existence, the nature of a priori reasoning, and the meaning of sensory experience and what constitutes valid argument. In the more down-to-earth world of social research thinking about ontology, it refers to beliefs about the fundamental nature of reality, in particular, social reality, end quote. Derrida used the term hauntology as an ontology in the sense of jazz. The important part of jazz is not the notes you play, but the notes you don't play. In 1994, Derrida wrote, "To haunt does not mean to be present, and it is necessary to introduce haunting into the very construction of a concept." In essence, hauntology is about being affected by the ontology of things that didn't happen. Even the word hauntology is in itself hauntological. In French, you would pronounce ontology and hauntology in the same way, dropping the H, ontology, so that ontology is haunted by the letter H that you didn't use. All right, that's fun and interesting. But what the fuck does that have to do with Killer Klowns? If the whole film is a pastiche of the 1950s and the 1960s in horror, we are being forced to live with the 1950s and 1960s that didn't happen for most of the world. Small town Americana only happened for small town America, and we are constantly held against the false history of a lifestyle that never happened for most and couldn't, not wouldn't, but couldn't happen again. But I don't think the hauntologic ends here. The philosopher Mark Fisher would argue for the hauntological idea of the lost future. That is, a future that we were promised, but only ended up getting more of the same thing. Think about it. Is the world we inhabit the world we were promised? Or did we live in the world that seemed so inevitable given the science and the media of the time? Has there ever been a future we were promised? I think the answer is no, and when you consider the sheer amount of 1970s and 1980s horror reboots, remakes, retreads, or just sheer fucking ripoffs, well, speaks for itself. With every reiteration of Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, we can only think back to the original, knowing that we've had it before and had it better. Is any of the remakes of Halloween better than the original Carpenter Halloween? It gets worse when you think about how much good original horror media has come out in the last 20 years but barely sees the light of pop culture, right? To me, it seems that we can't escape the Killer Klowns even now because it's somehow distilled all of the horror of an era into one absurd and honestly pretty thoughtless package. It's the horror of the 1980s that only ever partially existed, and the horror of the 1960s we just fucking can't escape. I have very likely bastardized the work of Derrida and Fisher here, and as a result, I recommend you both give them a read. Neither of them are particularly challenging philosophically or intellectually. I think anyone can pick up most of their texts and read them pretty easily. They're not as impenetrable as much of pop philosophers would have you believe they are. Hell, we don't even have much in the way of pop philosophy anyway these days, but Fisher and Derrida will always sit just outside of the mainstream. So I can't recommend that you give their texts a look enough. You really should go. There will, of course, be links in the show notes that will help you look down this rabbit hole. There are few things I dislike more in the world of media criticism than trying to point out every single inaccuracy in a movie or a TV show or whatever. If you dig into the whole cinema sins YouTube vibe, that's great for you, but I think it's very silly. Movies don't necessarily need to be 100% accurate, right? And that goes double for horror. If you're willing to swallow an alien invasion killing off a small town, it seems pretty silly to really criticize every plot point, right? But there are some things about Killer Klowns that have just never sat right with me. I feel like the whole premise is just absolutely absurd. This movie strains my credulity in a way that I just can't excuse. So let's start at the bottom. Some very minor spoilers ahead, but if you're already this far into the episode, sorry, you've signed on to it. I don't know how we spoil Killer Klowns, right? Okay, so let's just start with the obvious here. Why are the Killer Klowns? Why are they clowns? Can we start there? Listen, I'm not going to sit here and be that guy, but if we assume that the forces of natural selection are not purely a concern of those of us on Earth, then what set of environmental conditions led them to look exactly like normal human clowns? My first thought was, well, what about the mantis shrimp? They are kind of clown colored and they have a weird body shape, so maybe that explains the whole clown thing. Why do aliens look like clowns? But that doesn't work for me. Are they supposed to be aquatic? No, I'm too stuck on the mantis shrimp thing. Or is the visual spectrum on the home world of the Killer Klowns so different from ours that their coloring is an advantage? Like, think about it. The bottom of the ocean, the color red doesn't penetrate, so there's a lot of red deep sea animals. So if you're red, you're invisible. Okay, what if it's not that? Okay. Maybe it's a peacock thing used for mating displays. But do you want to think about them engaged in carnal congress? I don't. Clown fucking's a nightmare. I don't want to think about it. All right. Okay. Let's drift away from clown mating and get into their methods of killing. They're killer clowns, right? That's the thing we should be worried about, not what's between their legs. All of their weapons are clowny. They're weapons that clowns should use, right? The one that annoys me the most is the popcorn shotgun. Hear me out, okay? Joe, I know you lived more in the country than you did in the city. You're more of a county guy than I am. You've fired a shotgun, right?
Several times.
Okay. I've fired shotguns too. I've been to the shooting range. That's not how shotguns work. The only way that a popcorn shotgun works is if the popped kernels they're shooting are like buckshot or weigh as much as buckshot. Think corn kernels made of lead. Okay? Well, what if, hear me out. I know I'm going off the rails here. What if the gravity on their planet is different from ours, and that affects how projectile works, right? Because if they're using a shotgun-like weapon, it means Earth-like gravity. But popcorn kernels are light. Popcorn, when it's popped, is super light. If that's the case, why are they mostly human-sized?
I like to think that the Killer Klowns are clowns because it's the 80s.
Okay.
And we just started with a concept. Aliens come to kill people. We've got so many of those movies.
Yep, we do.
How do we make ours different? What if they're clowns? Somebody in that room had to say, well, this cocaine's great, so let's go with that. But then somebody else had to say, why would they be clowns?
Okay.
And then the director, the writer, whomever had to come up with a reason. And though it's not really explained, if you asked me to explain it, I would say the aliens are psychic. And they selected a form that they knew would appeal to children.
You're just stealing The Shining. You're just stealing Pennywise the dancing clown from Shining. That's all you're, not The Shining, Jesus fucking Christ. It. You're stealing Pennywise the Clown from It.
I'm going to let you have it because Pennywise is part of the Dark Tower.
But
it's all Dark Tower.
No, it's not.
Thank you.
It's not. Okay, fine. Let's go with your stupid assumption then. But then let's talk about the end of the movie, okay? First things first. Let's talk about the giant, like, T-Rex sized clown at the end. What's never explained is why do they have a T-Rex sized clown at the end? It came out in 1988, which means it came out after the movie Aliens with James Cameron, right? So is the giant T-Rex sized clown supposed to be like the xenomorph queen at the end of Aliens? All right. Fine, I'm willing to accept that as an explanation, but there's a problem there. That means that the T-Rex sized clown at the end of the movie is responsible for producing all of the other clowns. And fine, but I don't see some sort of clown cloaca on it, so it's not giving birth to smaller, androgynous, non-matriarchal clowns. Where are the clown eggs? Okay, fine, but let's get to the one thing about this fucking movie that annoys me more than any fucking subject. The only place in the film where there is an actual carnival is at the end of the movie. There is a whole ass carnival going on at the end of the movie, and they land in the middle of the woods. Why didn't they land at the beginning of the movie at the carnival? Why didn't they land at the carnival?
Because if they land at the carnival, they don't have to walk around the city trying to kill people?
You know, I've been carrying that for a long time. I've been carrying that anger for a long time, and I needed to get that out of my system. This is a breakthrough, ladies and gentlemen. I've had a psychological breakthrough. I'm feeling a little better. Where were we? Right, we were talking about killer clowns. So yeah. Maybe I've overthought this just a little bit. And I think in my position, it's hard not to. Overthinking horror movies is what I do. But I just don't like that the film goes totally unexamined. And I know that Killer Klowns from Outer Space will always have its like most ardent following. The movie, it isn't to my taste. And I find it sort of telling that the film doesn't get a lot of critical examination or is somehow exempt from any further discussion. But that makes me want to know what you all think. Like, I want to ask, why is this movie so fucking immortal? Why is there a Killer Klowns video game that just recently came out? Is Killer Klowns, because of its subject matter, removed from critical examination? And am I wrong about the evolutionary process of clownkind? Is there a clown cloaca? And what other 80s exemplar should I be looking at next? You can let us know. If you really want to talk about this, I guess, by emailing us at thefrightlabpodcast@gmail.com. And we can be found on all social media platforms. Just look up The Fright Lab or look up Fright_Lab_pod, as well as on YouTube. Joe, can you let our gruesome audience know where they can find your other projects?
You've made an interesting point tonight, Lucas.
About the clown cloaca?
That Killer Klowns from Outer Space doesn't need to be a video game. But if I was trying to make yet another Dead by Daylight clone and I was looking for something trendy that people would buy, I would consider Killer Klowns from Outer Space. But that leads to the larger question about why isn't there a copy of Left 4 Dead where it's Troll 2? I'm going to let that sink in.
Why is that a question you have? Joe,
somebody is going to make that mod now, and then we get to play it on Patreon, sir.
I hate you so much.
I don't feel bad for anybody that has watched this movie. I feel bad for the person who thinks it's still funny to say, we got to watch Killer Klowns again.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's
but then
fair.
again, you come to this podcast because you like horror movies, and that's part of the deal. That's part of what appeals to us, fans of horror movies. We like to talk about the thing we love. And discord.thefrightlab.com is where this conversation will continue and where I would like you, the listener, to join Lucas and I, where we continue this conversation. We talk about killer clowns from outer space and far greater horror movies. There's also Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram. You heard Lucas say it, the Fright Lab Podcast at gmail.com. Send us an email. Let us know how we are doing. If you are a fan of all things heavy metal, you need to be listening to the podcasts we are creating at discussmetal.com. We talk about your favorite bands, my favorite bands, heavy metal subjects. I've been creating a whole lot of spooky rock and roll with the Dammit Janets, and you can find out everything about that band at thedammitjanets.com. Please take out your phone. Scroll to the left, scroll to the right, find the 5-star review, find the thumbs up, find the place where you can leave a comment and let us know your thoughts on killer clowns from outer space. Lucas, please tell the audience how much we appreciate independent artists, independent media, and how thankful we are to be here at episode 50.
Episode 50, man, that number has been hanging over me a lot recently. And I've got to tell you, fans, friends, siblings, one and all, 50 episodes. Thank you so very much for tuning in and listening, giving me constructive feedback, giving Joe constructive feedback. It means the world to me. And I know as a fact, you wouldn't be listening to this episode if you didn't believe the way I believe. Very simply, DIY media, independent music, independent film, it is the way of the future. There's always going to be someone telling you that you should love a silly movie, even though you know it's bad. But there's always going to be someone telling you that you should love a scary movie, even though you know it didn't get the attention it deserves. So, if you feel that your project is not getting the attention it deserves, be that a horror podcast, an independent short horror film, independent long horror film, be that horror punk, horror pop. I don't know what that sounds like, but it sounds amazing. Horror hip hop. I've heard that before. The Gravediggers. What up? More importantly, some next level dark ambient shit. Whatever it is you're working on, we want to hear about it and we want to amplify the signal of your project. Again, reach out to us at the Fright Lab Podcast at gmail.com. And 50 episodes in, as always, The Fright Lab is written and researched by me, Lucas Yoakum, my co-host, producer, engineer, the only man who will tolerate me for episodes of this nonsense is the one and the only Joseph Wren. We appreciate you all so very much. And we will talk to you again very, very soon. Thank you all.
That's Fright Lab for you.
That is the most pure philosophy I've ever dropped in an entire paragraph of Fright Lab. Holy shit.
Well done, dude.
Oh, okay.